Hello everybody and welcome back to Art Appreciation. Module 6 will be broken down into 3 parts. So part 1 is going to be photography, part 2 is going to be a video sort of going through the camera, and then part 3 is going to be graphic design. So we're going to start with the first part. It's going to be the longest part, the other ones should be really short. So, photography literally means light writing, although, as your textbook points out, light drawing may be a more accurate term. Like drawing, photography can either be a practical tool or an art form. This is Alma Levinson. This is her Clouds. It was created in 1940. Skilled photographers not only have to select a camera, lens, and film, but also have to make choices about composition, angle, focus, distance, light, and depth of field. In this work of art, we see such decisions. The angle is low to the ground, looking up, so we see mostly sky. The horizon line is lower. The photographer chose not to let as much light into the camera, so the whites are not super bright. So we have a dark looking sky. The clouds look darker. We don't really have a bright white. We see a deep depth of field, meaning that we see things further away from the camera that are in focus. And we see a balanced composition. So let's start from the beginning. Before we have the cameras that we know today, we had the camera obscura. So the camera obscura really was a drawing tool. So with the camera obscura, we learned that if you have a little pinhole in a dark space, it shows what's on the other side of that pinhole flipped upside down. So the image is flipped. So people who wanted to draw but weren't very good at it would often do this and then trace the design. We could see the image, we saw it in light, but we didn't really have a way to fix the image. So when I say fix the image, I mean make it stay on a piece of paper or on any object, substance, media. For a while, there were ways to have a temporary image embedded, but it usually only lasted at max a couple of hours. So sometimes the camera obscura was an entire room. Sometimes it was just a small box. So this is a case where he's tracing. So it comes through the pinhole, or in this case, it has a lens on it. Hits the mirror, shines up, and he traces the image above. So here's just a timeline. Don't get too caught up on this. This is just for you to reference if you want to. You don't have to memorize dates or anything like that in this class. But it kind of shows you how long people were really working on this photographic process. So Niepce before Niepce, I know, what a name, created the first photographic process. For his process, the images couldn't be fixed. They were very short-lived, but he continued to work on it. And then in 1838, he worked with Louis Jacques Mondé Daguerre and invented the daguerreotype. So Daguerre sort of built on Niepce's research. They actually did know each other. At the same time that Daguerre and Niepce were working, William Henry Fox Talbot began his research in 1834. William Henry Fox Talbot wanted to create a photographic process because he was really bad at drawing, and he couldn't stand it. So he wanted a way to capture images of things that he saw without having to draw them. So that is solely why he did his research. He actually figured photography out, but never presented it or patented it. He just kept it for himself. So Daguerre sort of published his findings with the daguerreotype in 1838. And then William Henry Fox Talbot actually patented the calotype process in 1841 after he found out about daguerres. And then in 1888, we have the Eastman Kodak Company, founded by George Eastman, which is really important. It allowed photography to be more accessible. So let's look at some art. So this is Niepce 4 Niepce, view from the window at Gras. This is 1826. So it's very blurry. It's not very sharp. This has to be kept in the dark. It's actually still kept in the dark today. You can't just go view it in a museum. Any kind of light deteriorates this image even more. So it's kept completely in the dark now. Then we get daguerres. This is the daguerreotype. This is one is from 1837. It's called the Artist's Studio. So we still have very high contrast. A lot of this like scratching and pattern actually comes from wear over time. But we do have very high contrast. We get a lot of sharper images. So we get more detail. There's less sort of fuzzy things happening. Here's another daguerreotype. So one of the things about the early photographic processes is they had very, very long exposure times. So when I say exposure time, what I mean is this is a light sensitive process. So it's all about how much light is let into something. We talked about light in Module 1. I know it's been a hot minute. But light is what's captured on the image. If there's no light hitting it, that's going to be black. If there's a lot of light hitting it, that's going to be white, especially in these black and white photographs. It varies with color. So they had really, really long exposure time. So we don't see a lot of images of people in the beginning. People are always moving. Even when you try to sit perfectly still, you're going to blink. When you breathe, your nose might flare, your chest rises, you have a heartbeat. So you've got movement in your neck muscles. It's not even your muscles, it's just the blood pumping through your body. We twitch, we fidget, we move, we can't help it. It's just, we are always in motion. So if you try to take a photograph with a 2-minute exposure time, you're going to pick up blur from that. So a lot of our original photographs are of sort of these cityscapes. Here, we do see two people. This is a street in the middle of the day. It's actually a very busy street. None of the people show up, except for these two, because everybody else is in movement. So nothing is sat still long enough to actually pick up on the camera. Except for these two. It's a man getting his shoe shined. And he stood there long enough that it actually picks up on the camera. So this is William Henry Fox Talbot. This is his work. So William Henry Fox Talbot's calotypes or salt prints was a negative process. So that means the image that is originally captured is a negative. So what's supposed to be dark is actually light, and what's supposed to be light is actually dark. So positives had to be made from the negatives to actually get a usable image. The benefit of this is you could make copies. So his process was done on paper. And paper can be transparent with the light. So light can shine through the paper onto another piece of paper underneath, and you can make a copy. So you could have an infinite number of copies from one negative until your negative gets damaged or you don't feel like making any more copies. That differed than daguerres. So daguerres process is also called tintypes, which a true tintype uses a little bit different materials, but they're really similar. But they're done on metal, usually tin, sometimes silver. So we had a positive process. We had a positive image right away. the downfall of this is you cannot make copies. You only get one. Usually daguerreotypes are displayed in a frame because they're metal. They have a jagged edge. Whereas the calotypes are paper. They're not always shown in a frame. Both of them have really good detail, and both of them have long exposure times. Over time, they are developed better. Once we get the original process, things are developed further, so they have shorter exposure times, and that allows us to get these images of people. It's still a longer exposure time than what we have today. So these could be 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 10 seconds, depending on the light coming in to whatever space the photo is being taken. They usually had frameworks set up, so they would sort of strap you in if you went to go get your portrait made, just hold you still. So even then, we're constantly getting faster shutter speeds until we get to the Eastman Kodak Company. So in 1888, the Eastman Kodak Company was founded by George Eastman in Rochester, New York. George Eastman's goal was to make photography more accessible to the masses, and he succeeded. The famous slogan, "You press the button, we do the rest," is still known today. It's still used today. And the name Kodak comes from the sound the camera makes when you press the button. The Kodak Company created more sensitive materials that allowed for faster shutter speeds, and these faster cameras allowed amateur users to easily take photographs. The everyday man's photography was still about documentation or novelty, but not really about art. But this allowed photography to be accessible to the public, to everybody. So you would buy a Kodak camera. You would take your images, fill up the film, and send it back, and they would process. They would process the images and send you the images back. So over time, things got cheaper. Process got quicker. We get color photography. Kodak is one of the leaders in color photography. And Kodak still exists today. You can still buy a Kodak camera. You can still buy Kodak film and ink. They actually do printers now for printing photography. You can get Kodak prints made. I think at CVS still has Kodak print image printers. So Kodak's still around. And we'll talk some about Kodak in Module 3 too. So part 2 is going to talk about this a little bit better. But this is a diagram of a camera. So the modern camera does still resemble a camera obscura. We have light coming in. It comes in through a lens. It hits a plate in the back, and the image is flipped. This is an example of a film camera. It's a little bit easier to understand it with film than it is with digital, but digital does the same thing, except instead of hitting a piece of film, it hits a sensor. And sometimes those sensors are really big, sometimes they're really small. It just depends on the camera. So light comes in through the lens. We have an aperture. So the aperture is the hole opening of your lens. If you have a really small aperture, you're going to have a really deep depth of field, which we'll talk about in just a second. If you have a really big aperture, you're going to have a really shallow depth of field. So this is how much light's coming in the camera through the hole. Then another way that we have control over the light coming in the camera is the shutter. So the shutter opens and closes to allow light in, and that light's directed by the aperture. The lens is more about focus and distance than anything else. It just helps clarify the image, but the actual capture of the image, the amount of light being let in, that sort of thing is determined by the aperture and the shutter speed. We have another element to that called ISO, and that is solely based on your sensor or your film. You can control it with like a DSLR camera. If you buy 400 ISO film or 100 ISO film, it just depends. The higher number means you're going to have more grain. The lower the number, the less grain. Again, not super important to y'all right now unless you're going to do photography. But Main things are aperture and shutter. This controls the light coming into the camera. So we talked about depth of field. So shallow depth of field means the amount of image that is in focus. So shallow depth of field, we don't have very much in focus. We have a very shallow area in focus. So it's the rocks and anything in line with the rocks. Anything in front of the rocks is blurry. Anything behind the rocks is blurry. And that's because of depth of field. Deep depth of field, we have more in focus. So everything far away is in focus as well as everything close up. You can control the depth of field with a shallow depth of field, especially by using focus. You can choose to focus on something far away or close up, and that's within the lens. So again, the bigger your aperture, the shallower the depth of field. The smaller your aperture, the deeper depth of field. So today, photography we have access to photography. Everybody does. We have it on our phones. We have it on our computers. Everybody takes pictures, or most everybody takes pictures. This hasn't always been the case. A lot of people had their photos made, but photography wasn't always accessible. So this is Alfred Stieglitz, the steerage. It was captured in 1907, but it wasn't actually printed until 1913. Alfred Stieglitz was an early crusader of photography as an artistic medium. He opened a photography gallery in New York City in 1905, where he displayed his own photographs as well as others working with photography as an artistic medium. So, from the get-go, pretty early on, this is 1907. So Eastman Kodak, 1888. Photography has only been around for maybe 50 years at this point. We're already starting to see photography being used as an art medium, not just for documentation. Many contribute the rise of photography as an artistic medium to Man Ray. He worked in the 1920s, and he explored the possibility of the medium and invented things like the rayograph, or photogram, as it's more commonly called. He experimented with light and shadow techniques, and along with Picasso, worked with light painting. So this is a rayograph, or we call it photogram. So basically, he took a piece of photography paper, or light-sensitive paper, and laid objects on it to create a new image. So this isn't actually an image created through the camera. This is created in the darkroom with objects and exposing the paper to light. He also worked with light like in a studio. He focused light different ways. These are actually little glass teardrops to see how it would capture the light. We also get different sort of perspectives with photography. So with a painting, they take so long. If you're going to do a portrait in painting, you're typically going to do a full portrait. You're either going to do full body, a bust, you're going to get the full face. Whereas with photography, you could get these detailed shots because you could take multiple shots in one sitting. You didn't have to paint and work for months and months and months to capture somebody. So it allowed for more playfulness. It allowed for more experimentation with composition. Dada also worked in the Dada and Surrealist styles. He really considered himself a painter, not a photographer, and he did paint, but he was more famous for his photographs. His experimentation and manipulation of photography influenced other artists and photographers, giving rise to photography as an artistic medium. So this is a solarized portrait of Lee Miller. So he took the portrait, developed it, printed it, But before it was finished, or before he fixed the image, he put it back into, or he exposed it to light again. And then he developed and fixed the image. So this is a chemical process. When you make images in the darkroom, I guess I should have included this in the lecture earlier on. I have a video that I may post that explains it, but you take your film out of the camera in the dark, you develop your film. So you're going to use, it's 3 different chemicals. It's a developer, a stop, and a fix. So the developer is what activates the chemicals for the image to show. Your stop stops that developer from continuing. If it develops forever, it'll just get darker and darker and darker until it's just black. So the stop stops the developer. Then you have the fix, which is what actually adheres the image to the media. So the fix makes it stay forever, or until it's damaged or age gets to it, etc. And then you wash it with water. Once you have your film, you put it in an enlarger, which is a light source with a little lens underneath. That lens makes your little picture on film bigger. You can make it as big as you want to make it, within reason. And then you develop that onto photographic paper. So with your paper, you shine your light on it. You're not going to see anything. It's just going to look white. This all has to be done in the dark or with a red light. So in the dark room, we use red lights, amber lights. So you'll use the enlarger to make the image onto photographic paper. Once that's done, it'll just appear to be white. You'll put it in the developer. It's the same chemicals, just in different concentrations. So you put it in the developer, and that's when your image starts to show up. If you leave it in developer for too long, it'll get too dark. So that's what the stop is for. And then you fix it to make it stay. So if you take it out of the stop and expose it to light again, it's going to get these sort of dark outlines around things. So the fix keeps that from happening. But it can be done on purpose for artistic purposes. So this is Edward Stechen's The Pond, Moonrise. It was done in 1904. It's a platinum print. You're going to see things like silver gelatin, platinum. So different metals are used. That's what's actually going to make the darkness of an image. Here's some more by Edward Stechen. So again, we have experimentations with light. This is actually, I think this is a projector. I may be wrong about that. So I like to break photography down into different categories for this lecture, just to help us talk about them. There are not really official categories for photography, but it kind of helps to think about them in different realms. So I like to break it down into fine art photography, documentary photography, and social photography. Different works of art can fit within multiple of these categories. So this is an example of what I would call fine art photography. And this is a modern example. So David LaChapelle uses photomanipulation to create surrealist works of art. His photographs are often compositions of different photographs put together to create one image. This is all done digitally. This is in the modern age. So he's using a digital camera. He's using digital software. We do see things like this happening with AI. This is not AI. This is pre-AI. This is 2017. AI usually takes images like this and puts them together, which is not great. Don't do that. But we have easier photo manipulation with the digital realm. Here's some more of his. So again, the purpose of these is fine art. He has a purpose. He has a thought. They're not just meant for social purposes. He's creating something with a meaning and a purpose. Here we all have Jerry Ullsman. So Jerry Ullsman does the same thing. It's photo manipulation. However, he does it in the darkroom, which is a little bit more difficult. So if you notice, this one is 1999 to 2004. It's because it took years to capture all of the pieces and put them together. So, as I explained earlier, he puts film into an enlarger, sets it up for different pieces to be exposed onto the paper at different times. So usually he has multiple enlargers going at the same time. He uses things called burning and dodging. So burning is when you allow light to burn through. So you allow the light to hit the paper. Dodging is when you cover up part of the paper so the light can't hit. So he uses burning and dodging to allow certain elements of a photograph to come through and certain elements not to. So these are some more. All of this is film. All of this is done in the darkroom with enlargers and paper and film. Then we have documentary photographs. So documentary photographs can also be fine art. The ones that I'm using as an example are also, I also consider to be fine art photographs. But the purpose of documentary, what makes them documentary, is because we are looking to document an event, a moment in time, something that's happening, whether in your personal life, whether in the world, something like that. That's what makes it documentary. A lot of social photography is also documentary. You're documenting what you had to eat. You're documenting your friend's birthday party. You're documenting the concert you went to. What makes it social is when you share it. These were in a time before social media. This is Dorothea Lange's Migrant Mother. It dates from 1936, so before computers at all. Dorothea Lange created documentary photographs of the Dust Bowl and the Depression-era workers. Her work was funded by the New Deal Farm Security Administration as a way to introduce America to Americans. Her portraiture focused on the emotions of the people in distress to evoke a sense of sympathy from the viewer. So she took these very intimate photographs of people. She also took images of some of the Japanese concentration camps in 1942. A lot of those images have not been published. So she took pictures for the government. A lot of times she did not actually print these pictures herself. Sometimes she didn't even get to see them, her finished product. So she would take the photos, mail the film back to Washington, D.C., and then somebody in D.C. would actually develop the film and print the photographs. They were in newspapers, they were in pamphlets, they were in flyers and brochures. They are still at the National Archives. I don't even think all of her film has been developed. I think there's still just film in boxes at the National Archives. So, very cool. Another example is Ansel Adams. So Ansel Adams documented images of Yosemite Valley and Sierra Nevada. He was also an environmental activist that called for the preservation of the wilderness. You can really see that in his photography. He takes a lot of photographs that show these sublime landscapes. The purpose is to show the viewer the beautiful wild that needs to be preserved. So this is El Capitan, 1952. Here's some more. So again, there's no photo manipulation here. These are places that he saw and took photographs. He hiked to these places. He visited these places and did no photo manipulation at all. Now moving on to social photographs. We're going to be really brief here. Most of you, I assume, probably have social media of some kind. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, or it's X now. So anytime you post photos of what you're doing or who you're with or this was my day, that would be social photography. So we see it a lot with celebrities. Some of these photos are probably taken with fine art in mind. They're using things like composition, or they have a professional photographer taking images for them. But a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are just documenting their day and posting them. We do have some exceptions to that. So this is Brooke Shaden. She is a photographer. She actually does a lot of tutorial videos for Adobe Photoshop. But she shares her photographs on Instagram. And her photos primarily exist in the digital realm, either on her Instagram or on her website. She does print them and show them in galleries, but not always. A lot of them exist solely online. So it's both social and fine art. Here's some more examples from her. All of these are taken from her Instagram. They're in that square format. They're meant to exist digitally. Another example is Anastasia. I'm not even going to pronounce that last name because I am so bad, as you all know. But she does the same thing. Her photography is primarily for the digital realm. It's meant to be viewed online. So that's it for our photo, part 1. Part 2 is going to be sort of walking you through the camera, showing you the aperture and the shutter on a camera. And then part 3 is going to be graphic design. So don't forget to put all your notes in one document. Designate part 1, part 2, part 3, which part 2 you shouldn't have to take a ton of notes on. And that's it for this one.